Hello, welcome back to another episode of Film and Impact, where we speak with indie filmmakers from around the world who are using documentaries to move the needle. I'm your host, Zephyr Ray, and today I'm speaking with a filmmaker from the Bahamas, people. Yes, so excited. This creative, who defines herself as a documentarian, has a photography-based practice that includes traditional documentary work along with new media abstractions of written, oral, and archival histories. Her work examines the complexities of living in a place that is shrouded in tourism's ideals. Now, this is something I think a lot of us from the Caribbean and just generally the tropics can relate to. When the place where you live is perceived in the collective imagination simply as a tourism destination, how do you creatively question and address that? So we're going to be talking today about the challenges of being a filmmaker in the Caribbean, creating connections when we live in different islands, also making research-based art with intent of having impact, and just how storytelling is an integral part of Caribbean identity. So let's welcome documentarian Tamika Galanis to Film and Impact. Tamika, thank you for being on Film and Impact with me. Thank you for chatting with me today. I'm really excited to have you. This is my first conversation with a filmmaker from the Caribbean, so that's pretty awesome for me. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You know, you're from the Bahamas, even if the early part of your life was spent elsewhere, but you grew up there. And how did you become a filmmaker? And what was that journey like?
So my dad and my grandfather, and I didn't realize this until late in my life, but we have so many family archives of photographs and films that I've been looking at over the course of my life. And there was something instinctually that came about, I think, from looking at those collections, that personal family archive for such a long time, that I didn't realize that I had an eye for documentary, and not just film, right? But all the other ways that documentary appears in the world. And I think maybe in 2008, I started doing a bit of my own tinkering with the camera. And I don't think I really even call myself a filmmaker, or that any of the projects that I was making was film, until I found a grad school program that I felt like I was just the right fit for. So after that, and learning a bit of tools, then that the rest was history.
And like, how long did it take you to like sort of define yourself in those terms as a filmmaker?
Not until very recently, actually. Not until just a few years ago, I'd say, because what I thought I was doing was just tinkering. I didn't know that there were people out here making work like the work I was making, and actually calling that film, or even calling myself, a multidisciplinary artist. Yeah. Not until just a very, very short while ago.
Yeah. And what was it like, starting this journey for you, in retrospective, when you look back at the, all the years of what you call tinkering, did it help you to sort of understand yourself better, or what it was that you were trying to do, the stories that you were trying to tell, when it became apparent that it was no longer just tinkering? Did it change something for you when you realized that? Did you feel like you were trying to actually piece together something or do something very specific?
Yes, Absolutely. So with any of the work that I make, I always make something with the intent of understanding it, or to gain a better understanding of whatever it is that I'm setting out to do. Um, it wasn't very clear what the overall umbrella was until, like, I really have to say grad school was like the turning point. It was the definitive point. Okay, this is what this project is. This is what, well, the project turns out to be a life work, right? Because as long as the Caribbean is here, as long as this region is here, as long as we are contending with the issue of climate change, which I don't want us to be contending with climate change for a long while, but I want us to be here for a long while. So
Yeah.
in trying to figure out where I situate myself and my work as it pertains to climate change and all the projects that I make, I realized in grad school that I'm making these things to understand this issue, to understand myself, to understand my position, my country's position in this region's position in this world, and what it means to be a small island developing state. But that was concretely during grad school. I said, this is it. This is the project. This is what happens. And it comes out in many different ways, right? It comes out through film, many different films, photographs, experimental work, etc. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, yes.
Because I'm just rambling.
No, definitely. This is
Okay.
something that I've seen in your work a lot, and it's something that you explore also a lot. For example, you explore the impact of tourism on our small island states in the Caribbean. I've seen your experimental piece on the lionfish, which in the Caribbean, we know the impact that this has on the coral reefs and the endemic species of, marine life. And I see that the work that you do in there is, you correct me if I'm wrong, in trying to understand the impact that these things have on the Caribbean islands, that in some way, hopefully, we can also find a response to the problems that we're having. I'm thinking also of your piece on the hurricane, and I know that you have recently, a hurricane or storm recently passed through. It did not leave. It wasn't as damaging as the monster storms from 2017, but it's still something that's very, very present in people's minds. As somebody from Dominica, I know just how much this experience and these experiences of the hurricanes passing through are traumatic when you come from an island, and in the blink of an eye, in the space of like a night, your whole life can just like literally disappear. Like everything that is gone. And I think that pieces like that, they tell the stories very powerfully, while raising awareness on like issues like climate change. I'm not sure if you had the intention of raising awareness on the issue, or if it's more about you trying to understand, as you said, where your country situates itself with regards to the question. If you have also in mind like sort of like pragmatic solutions that might be found, or if it's more about exploring, and then, if it leads to solutions, then all the better.
Yeah. My dream position in making this work is to be a part of an interdisciplinary think tank of sorts, right?
Yeah, okay.
Because I don't have any experience with science. And while I love science, that's not the way I think that I can impact this thing. What I can do is raise an awareness through the humanities for exactly where we are situated, right? Like, for instance, the Inter-American Development Bank, is that the name of it? IDB. IDB published a study in 2017 called the Blue Urban Agenda, and it kind of rang the alarm in terms of laying out for us that the Bahamas is the most extreme case of low elevation coastal zones throughout the region, okay? It kind of laid out who we are as a small island developing state and what kind of access we have. But those things are whose eyes gets on those documents. Those are for scientists, those are for academics. That doesn't reach beyond the academy walls. That doesn't reach beyond these ivory towers that we write these studies for, right? So really, I think my position in this work is for Bahamians who I identify with, for other Caribbean nationals who identify with this, that are not, that don't have access to the academy, that don't have access to the galleries, that don't have access to these studies. I think it's kind of my job. I think it's Caribbean makers' job to take these studies, and I know everybody doesn't make research-based artwork, but I think we're kind of tasked with putting this information in a language that the working class, most importantly, understands. So I think definitively I am there to translate this into a language that everyday working Bahamians and whoever else throughout the region identifies with, to make this more palatable and in that way raise an awareness for some sort of impact.
And I think even for policymakers and persons who make the decisions, because a lot of the people who are most impacted directly may be the working class. So people, for example, who live on coastal areas and who see like their land literally disappearing from erosion.
Yes.
But the people who, like policymakers, for example, they may be approaching the question from, a different perspective, and they're not necessarily specialists in this either. So I think this kind of work where you're sort of breaking it down or putting it in terms where anybody can understand it is also just as important for them, because it serves as a basis that they can use in making decisions, but also in communicating with persons who, the layman, as you say. Yeah. And can you tell me a bit about just going back to becoming a filmmaker, and more specifically being that in the Bahamas? What is it like where you are, being a filmmaker, and what's the local scene like in terms of indie filmmaking? Is there an industry? Is there a network? Who do you connect with? What is it like? Or are you like a leaf in the wind or solitary tree?
Right there.
A solitary tree on the coast.
A leaf blowing in the wind. There are local filmmakers here. It's funny, right? Because the art community here, I would consider that I am connected to local makers. There are a handful of filmmakers who I would identify that work together. I know them, have a relationship of some sort with them, but it's not necessarily through filmmaking, but connected to a larger umbrella through the art community, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I've gotten accustomed to not having funding for projects. So when I set out to make something, I make something that I know that I can put together myself. And in saying that out loud, that makes me feel like now I need to go and do something about this lack of collaboration, right? And I'm glad you asked me that, because it puts it at the forefront of my mind. But up until this point, I really have been just a loner in my making.
And would you say that when you say you've gotten used to not having funding for your work, is it because you ask for funding and it doesn't get approved, or is it because you just figure, I'm going to do what I can do and not ask for funding?
I think it's equal parts, both those things. Humanities funding here is, I want to say it's almost non-existent. I've had, and I'm really exhausted of it, of asking for funding of organizations outside of the Bahamas, outside of the Caribbean. Most of my work has been able to make through fellowships, through institutions that are not here, not affiliated with the Caribbean. And it's not because I haven't looked or have been denied, I have gotten funding for a project through the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas in conjunction with the current art studios at Bahama. But those things come once every blue moon. Those opportunities are available. It's not, I'm not alone in this, because we have these questions in our small art community gatherings, right? Like everyone's looking for money. And I think everybody is doing their work on their own, because if we keep looking for it and it's not there, and we wait on it and it's not there, we wouldn't be making anything. So yeah, I think I said that was equal parts. Yes to that question, but I think it's more if we know if we don't do it, it won't get done. So we just do it.
So you definitely feel that there's a lack of opportunities for funding from the region itself. So those exist outside, and when you apply for outside funding, then you get accepted, to the things to the funding that you ask for. But
that has been my experience thus far. And it is probably the same where you're from, but there's favor for all things finance and banking and accounting and law. But the humanities, man, we get a hard run in the Caribbean. Well, here in the Bahamas.
Well, you're definitely not alone in that aspect, because I think it's something that's, as you said, the humanities generally, in the arts, as filmmakers for sure, we do have a big issue with getting funding for work. So I'm from Dominica, but I'm based in Martinique. And one of the issues that we have is, so there's funding, because Martinique is French, there's funding from the CNC, which is the Centre National du Cinéma. So they provide funding to the local authorities, to the local collectivity, and then the local collectivity distributes this funding on a rolling basis. And what we've noticed is that they provide a lot of funding for big productions that come from France. So for example, you have productions that come from France, and it's like a series that's on TV, and with actors, fiction especially, and then they're going to give like several €100,000 to this production. But for like small productions like ours, and especially documentaries, when you put in an application, even for like a very small grant, it might be like €5,000. It's quite difficult. And as a matter of fact, like I've never had the privilege of having one of those grants. It's quite difficult to have them. Should I have something that's actually on my computer that I need to turn off? It's difficult it's difficult to have them. And just generally, like in the region, the opportunities that we have are quite limited. So for us at Creatives on Films, I work with Stephanie Saxima, who's our director. And the opportunities we've had so far, they've all come from the outside. And so far, only from the US.
See? Okay.
So everything is quite, I think we have the opportunity to actually develop our cinema industry or filmmaking industry, be it fiction or documentary. And there are things that are being done. I'm seeing like slowly some things are being done. I see that the OEC is there like sort of putting in place things to support like the arts as a whole. So I see that there's stuff being done for like fashion, and there's some things that are being done for filmmaking. But I found that they're so isolated, and there's a certain lack of connectivity and connection between the different things that are happening, because
Yeah.
so many filmmakers that are there in the Caribbean, or just people in the arts, who absolutely do not know each other, do not know of each other. So we've been, when we started, we were very isolated. Like the first filmmakers that we connected with, and I think that's right, they were definitely not from the Caribbean. There were filmmakers from, I think, the US, the Europe, even Africa, before we connected really to filmmakers in the Caribbean. I can think maybe a couple of filmmakers in the Caribbean, but that has been like all my experience personally. So your experience is definitely not not isolated. I do think that it's the experience, it's a shared experience like amongst a lot of filmmakers in the region. So I think that people, listening can definitely relate to that. And one of our goals is definitely to connect people to each other, and to connect to create this network. When you
Thank you.
the network that you have in the Bahamas with the different people in the arts, is it for you like a support system? Does this, do you like help each other with work as you don't have funding? Like how does it work? How does it function?
Yes, absolutely. Or even if somebody has a service that they can provide at a special rate, or or if I need another pair of hands, or that kind of thing, or if I can be that for somebody else, then absolutely.
So you still like,
but I think in a lot of ways, and as I'm saying this, I'm glad you're making me say all these things aloud. In a lot of ways, I still think that, unless it's just me, maybe it's just me, but I think that there's so much more room for collaboration here. Yeah.
It definitely is. And maybe, the recent events with COVID they've brought to the forefront the different ways that we can collaborate. And we can imagine doing like virtual expositions, for example, or virtual screenings of experimental video collage, and or different art forms, multimedia being screened, or expositions in different spaces around the Caribbean virtually. Those kind of things are also ways in which like we can collaborate even if we're not physically in the same space. So definitely an idea.
Yeah.
To go on. And maybe it's also from these spaces that we can create a more formal support system, that allows us to create those opportunities for funding, opportunities for work, opportunities for collaboration, for networking, and also for skill and capacity building, and so on. So we
all of these things all of these things that you were saying are, yes, right. All of these things are on point. I think in the moment that we're living in, it sounds like all of these things are, I think we're seeing all of these situations with new eyes, right? Because we're kind of sitting still. All of the things that may have passed us by in just a few weeks ago, our existence has completely changed.
Mm.
For instance, we're back under 24-hour lockdown again,
Yeah, it's not
officially
much
today,
news.
2 weeks. Yeah. And everything that you're saying is making sense, right? But it's something that I think that we hadn't considered, or maybe it's me again. Maybe I can't speak for the collective in saying we haven't considered, because we have. I've been in on a few of these conversations, but I think it's even more present right now, given the moment that we're in.
Yeah, definitely timely, very timely, because I think right now everything is shifting the way that we do things. I really don't think that we're going to go back to just functioning as we were functioning before.
No.
A question on just functioning as like making film on an island and having access to material, for example. Like how is this been for you? Do you have like stores that sell material? This is a very practical question, because when you're on an island, I know that in the Caribbean, for us, for example, we don't have stores that just sell the kind of material that we need to make films. You can get certain kinds of, like DSLR cameras, but if you want anything a little bit bigger or a bit more specialized, then you might have to actually go out, leave the island, or get something shipped in, and it's extremely expensive. So if like you're on an island, you're making films, like where does your material come from, and what do you do when something goes wrong?
Panic. So that film, When the Lionfish Came, I was so a number of pieces. A lot of it is found footage, right? But some of it is actually underwater footage. And the Bahamas is an archipelago. So I'm equipped with just a GoPro, and I've just gotten my open water certification, my scuba certification, and I head to Andros, which is the home of like the third largest barrier reef in the world. And a family friend is going to teach me how to, what did he call it? It's not scuba, but you're hooked up to a compressor that's on the boat, right? I can't remember what it's called now, and so I only have my GoPro, and day 2 we're diving, and I'm only hopping off the boat into 15 feet of water, and the seal broke on the housing. Right. And the GoPro at that time is like $700 at
Yeah.
least to repair in the Bahamas. So I mean, I took sick. I couldn't even speak to anybody else for the rest of the day, because now this is $700 that I have to come up with, right? And how am I going to get it? Because I'm out in the middle of the Great Bahama Bank. I like had to get on phone, and something was happening. Maybe we were having a holiday weekend or something, because I had to ask somebody. I had to pay for it by credit card and ask somebody to go pick it up and drive it to the airport to put it on this plane to get to me on another island in the archipelago, right?
Yeah.
I didn't want to speak to anybody else for the rest of the day. I just kind of laid on the boat while everybody else snorkeled, because that is literally what it's like.
That will take like the life out of you.
To be here,
Yeah.
right? And something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Like in my experience, I have gathered a number of things that I consider my filmmaker kit, like my DSLR, the types of lenses that I like to shoot with. And over time, I've gathered things like ND filters and whatever I need. But if I need something like specifically anything else, I'm not importing anything else. You can count on the markup to be like 500%, right? So I think I have, and I can't speak for the other folks, because a lot of the filmmakers that I know that are in this community are actually making commercial pieces.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily making art-based pieces. You know what I mean? So I think they're functioning with black magic cameras and reds and whatever else. No, I have a DSLR, and I have that replacement GoPro that's been the same ever since that trip. And whatever I have, I'm using now. It still does get expensive when you think about making art films and needing to buy props and costume and all that other stuff. But there's no like rental place. And in that way, and as we're saying it again out loud, is thinking about these collabs now and how can we be of service to each other in providing equipment and making it available, especially in this time where everything is going to be different from here on out. You really have me rethinking the way I have to situate myself in this community in this time, and I appreciate that.
Because I think we're too small and the resources are too limited for us not to collaborate, you know. As you're saying, like you work with a DSLR and you know that there are other people who work with Blackmagic and who work with Red, for example, and it definitely can be interesting to like collaborate with these people on projects. When I think of this is something like this is a problem that we have like so often when you're an indie filmmaker and you're functioning like really out of your own pocket because in order for you to get like funding, you need to show that you can actually do a film, even if you're asking for like development funding. It's always better when you show something. You show an extract of the work of what you're doing, and you prove that I am actually a filmmaker asking for money. And you need to have material to do that. And when you take the money out of your own pocket to pay for your material and something goes wrong with the material, like, oh my God, it's like a double whammy punch to the gut. I'm thinking of this project that we worked on like back in 2017. I remember that was the first time we had gotten a wireless Sennheiser mic. And we were so proud of that thing, boy. We were so happy. The distance that you could like capture the song from, the person had like the receptor, and like oh my God, it was amazing. The song was like, we were like, oh wow, the song is so clean, excited. So we out filming, we were filming the film YOL. And so YOL is this race that they do yearly in Martinique. It's a race this is the only place that they do it in the world. It's a boat race, and it was the fishing boats. And you can look it up. It's really very unique. So we filming a team on the Tour de Yole de Martinique, and we're following these guys. And this day, on this leg of it's over 7 days, so it's a long race. They go all the way around the island. So on this day, they just arrived. It was already, the weather wasn't so hot, and then it just starts pouring like just a torrential rain. So we like run back to the car, but it's quite a distance. And by the time we get back to the car, we've tried to put stuff on our bags. Talk about preparation. Everything in the bag is like swimming in water. Like there's like literally like this much water. There's like 10 centimeters of water in the bottom of the bag. And there's the little case with the Sennheiser receptor just swimming in there. You can imagine, like, I think we bought that thing like almost $600. Our hearts just broke. Like in that moment, like we managed to save everything else, like really wiped everything down and like put stuff in like jars of rice. But but just that one receptor, like it just wouldn't come back on. And so we lost it and we had to buy it back. And we had to wait to shoot. I think we actually got another one when we did a trip, I think, to the US, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's how we managed to get the other one. So we couldn't even have it like just buy it and ship it in, because when we buy it and ship it in, the taxes are absolutely mind-blowing. Yeah. So like the thing of like having your material and everything that you have is like a huge investment for you as an indie filmmaker. So it really doesn't matter like the kind of material you have, but whether you have a DSLR or a Blackmagic. And like Blackmagic is, in terms of price range, like it's like wonderful quality, but it's on the same price range as all of DSLR cameras too. So
Yeah.
when you lose anything, it's, as you say, it's like sort of like panic, because you're like, what am I gonna do? You know?
Yeah.
We needed a battery for our Canon C 100, and we had to like wait like we had to wait months to get a new one, you know? And these are things that they can raise your anxiety levels a bit, because you're like, what if I'm on a shoot? And, you know, one of my batteries suddenly doesn't stop working. I'm like, you know, that other one doesn't stop working. I need another one. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I literally cannot work because I don't have a battery. Those kind of problems that you're confronted with when you like live on an island and you can't just like run to the, you know, you can't run to B&H or have them send you something online, you know, by post.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
question of collaborating is definitely one that I think is super important for us in the Caribbean. Like, how can we create maybe a system that allows us to share resources, maybe not share cameras across island, but within the islands where we are, you know, how can we build like the system that we have slowly, but definitely create something, because
Yes.
we're telling stories, I think, that are unique to us, that are unique to our realities. And we're telling them in so many different ways. You're telling these stories that for some of them you're going based on very, very personal experiences. When I think of the piece that you did on your mother, with the photographs. Oh my God, that was so beautiful. And others that go, you know, on based on research, like the piece with your film on the lionfish, for example. And those are stories that we need to see. Those are stories that we need to tell, because if we don't tell them, like if you don't tell that story, who else has told the story and who else is going to tell the story? Literally nobody. So we have to find ways to make these stories exist. So I don't know, just from here, from this space, maybe we can create some momentum for people that they can connect to, and you know, at least that it be a space for reflection on those things.
Hopefully so. And I don't know what it's like in Martinique or in Dominica in terms of experimental film, because I think we have been so hell-bent on creating traditionally narrative films here in the Bahamas that when experimental films show up on the scene, everyone's like, well,
What is
what am
that?
I watching?
Yeah.
What you even trying to say? And I'm like, it's a
Yeah.
whole nother language, you
Yeah.
know? But not only making that more space for those of us who make experimental films, but also to free people of this need to have a traditionally narrative tract, right? Like, it doesn't know the arc, teach the arc, know how to create the narrative arc, but then know how to break it. Like, free yourself from that and make
Yes.
something else and express yourself in other ways, right? Which is a huge dream that I have for my little islands in the sun, because man, I get a lot of flack off of experimental film, and I think the biggest one is that I just don't understand it. That's the biggest feedback that I get, right? Like, I don't understand what you were trying to say. And it makes me miss my experimental film peeps, but then it also opens this gaping hole of a need that needs to be met.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of not education, but having people understand that you don't have to understand it. There's not necessarily a direct message that I'm giving you, and I'm definitely not telling you what to think. It's more about opening yourself to what you feel and having the experience. I was speaking very recently on Film and Impact with another filmmaker, Iyabo Kwayana, who's from Guyana, and she was saying how filmmaking is, you know, a long tradition of storytelling.
Yes.
And I think that we, like in the Caribbean, we have a tradition of storytelling. Like we're storytellers. You know, she was talking
Yes.
about how your grandmother was a storyteller and how she would tell stories. Sometimes she would start a story and like the story didn't seem to end. Or she would she would tell you a story, this piece now, and then you'd have to come back like the next night to hear the other piece, like, you know, the beginning of series, serialized like storytelling. And how sometimes, you know, storytelling, it's just moments, you know, it can be a moment that
Exactly.
is captured, and uh, it doesn't have to be, you know, what we've gotten used to consuming on, you know, mainstream media, where you have the narrative arc that's just, you know, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It starts off somewhere, it climaxes, and then you have the resolution, and you go away feeling like, okay, I know what happened, so now I'm good, you know, that you're open
Yes.
to. This is also life, you know, in life, you don't always have this resolution. I think somewhere I was saying recently that this is somewhere like somewhat like getting people off, you know, fast food, and, you know, sort of we re-educate like our palates to different experiences in terms of storytelling, and, you know, how we approach and how we experience stories. I think this is what is going to change how we see the stories that are told locally. Because so what happens sometimes when we tell the stories, our local stories, is that people say, you know, well, it doesn't look like, you know, what I've seen there, or why didn't that happen like that, when comparing it to that traditional narrative arc, or like a show or movie that they've seen, like why didn't it happen like that, you know. So it's very limited, and it's creates a sort of barrier to them even accepting that the local stories that are being told. And I think it's a barrier between us, like, and ourselves, you know?
I was just gonna say that. You know what it is. It's being former colonies. It's this whole idea of respectability and what is proper
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah.
more valuable one than the other, right?
Yeah.
Um, I work with this for the past few years. I've been working with this archive of Bahamian materials that is at the Library of Congress from the Alan Lomax collection. And when I think about the sound recordings in that collection, and I think about what these folklorists and ethnomusicologists who had come to the Bahamas in 1935 thought was so valuable, and I think is so valuable now, right? A lot of my friends, I won't say colleagues, because I have colleagues who would think it's valuable, but I have a lot of people who would listen to it and think, well, what the hell? Why do you think that this is important? Like there's a song in this collection where this woman is going on about how she has on her nice dress and her necklace with the locket, and you know, she have on her this hat that she wants you. Clearly she's made up this song on the spot, right? But she's telling a story of her, right? Like this is her, this is what she values. And I'm sorry that that's not colonial enough for you, but this is valuable because this is the sound file of somebody from a lesser recorded island in 1935, and we now get to hold on to this and listen to this story that she's telling. In this whole COVID situation, like we've been on lockdown intermittently since the end of March. And in standing in all these shopping lines, you can't stand in a shopping line without somebody telling a story on the line. Whether or not it's their interpretation of what was in the news the day before,
Yeah.
or what's happening on social media, or you know, even their idea of the conspiracy theory around this virus, right?
Yeah.
People are standing in line telling stories. Like this is us. This is who we've been. But we've been conditioned into thinking that this isn't important and this isn't valuable. And it absolutely is. And when I say my work is about what's happening here outside the world, outside of the tourism bubble, that's what I'm talking about right there, right? Getting us to value, getting us to see that because of tourism, we have this, historically, because of tourism, we have this idea around respectability and what is supposed to be valuable, what isn't, what continues to be pushed as valuable, what isn't. Goes back to that narrative, traditional narrative and experimental conversation, right? In the things that we should be preserving because it's important and it's good. The things that are us, that are not dicty, that are maybe things that you'll never get your OBE for, right? But are important to us because yeah, this was a colony, but we still another set of people, a particular set of people, and particularly storytellers who live here and who've been here and still have plenty stories to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this we have to do away with this idea of value and how we value things. Not do away with it, but change it. It has to be shifted in some way. Yeah.
Definitely. I definitely meet you on that point. And I think that the fact that we have to make independent films in the region, and I'm really saying the region like in the broad sense because I include also other island states who are not in the Caribbean and who are facing similar problematics, and I include Latin Americans, Central American, where resources are different and access to resources and funding, etc., are different, and resources in all sense of the word, be it funding, be it networking, being just events, like anything that can help you, progress in your art and being able to tell your local stories, being able to represent yourself on screen, being able to give value to yourself, to your communities. I think that we have like a key role to play, and that's why we're also fighting, because impact is, we can have this impact in so many different ways. So we can have directly impact when we do a film, for example, talking about hurricane, and we can change policies, or we can move the needle in certain areas. And we can also have the impact that you never see, where people, just because we keep putting out this content, and we keep putting out films, and we keep putting ourselves out there, slowly, people who probably didn't envision the possibility of becoming this, they start seeing themselves, and they're like, okay, some young person be like, okay, I want to make films. I want to do something that looks like that. I want to do something that's better than that. I want to surpass this, or who's gonna like push themselves to do something, and until it becomes the norm, and maybe where we have teachers who use Caribbean films in schools. Just like how we use Caribbean literature, to open like discussions and to study it. Yeah. So I think that's part of our work in the Caribbean, to have these visual representations of our stories, like very present and normalized in our societies. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm completely in agreement with you there.
And on that note, is there anything that you're working on right now? Do you have any ongoing projects, like in film or in multimedia, or anything coming up in the future? I imagine that if you have anything, that it might have been affected by COVID, unless you do anything in your backyard.
I have lots of ideas that as the COVID protocols relaxed, I started to think, oh, now I can welcome in a couple extra pairs of hands to help me with something, and we find ourselves in the middle of a lockdown again. So I have some things that are just ideas right now. They're really, really just ideas and in the writing and trying to find time to still be creative amidst trying to deal with everyday life, right?
Yeah.
I was just talking to a friend today who said, we were kind of checking in on, hey, how you coping with this? Have you been able to do anything in terms of being creative during this time? And both of us were like, we're just trying to stay alive right now. Like we have to keep up with when can I go to the grocery store? When is it okay to drive to the bank? When are the gas stations open? Is this place open that I need to get this thing? It really doesn't leave any time for the way our personalities function, the way my personality functions. But hopefully we can find some solace here soon. There are ideas that need to be fleshed out, but yeah.
I know that with the hurricane season, like that has just, well, it started in June, but we're constantly on alert for storms moving through, and you recently had one passing through, and there's for me there's always during the hurricane season this we have like this light constant tension and this feeling of unrest, of the possibility of what might be. I think that does also affect like how we create too, this light agitation. Yeah.
Yes. And I, in times that have passed, I felt like I've been able to live through it, and then I go somewhere else, or I return to the US, whether it's for school or a fellowship or something, and I can see outside of it with new eyes and something creative comes of it, right? But that's not particularly my situation this year. And I'm here and there's nothing to leave and to go back to, and it feels different. Like I'm still in it. There's no stepping away from it to look at it from a different perspective, So also trying to figure out like, is this the new normal? Because there ain't nothing normal about this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just August. It's just the beginning of August. We got till the end of November. Isaias, I think that's how you pronounce the last hurricane that came through. We were taking the shutters down and somebody was like, man, it's like 4 more systems out in the Gulf. What?
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel you on that one.
Yeah, well, I'm always, hoping. I think when I was a child, I used to love the hurricane season. It was always like a time of excitement because then the wind would come and then the sea would cross the road and all the little red crabs would run from the holes, and sometimes you go pick them up and make like a pot with like red crabs, and you're always excited and you'd be like, I want to go see the sea, and your mother would tell you, stay in the house, and you would like steal away with the other children and go up on the road and watch the sea crossing the road, and every time a big wave would come, you'd feel like so much excitement. And it was a time of excitement. I remember like one hurricane season where we had a small house, so the wind was like so strong. There was always this one house in the neighborhood, they had the brick house because we didn't, so everybody would go to the brick house downstairs. That was like the refuge for the community. And I remember like my uncle, like my mom passing me through windows, so my uncle could take me to the house. It was excitement, As a child, you lived this like as an adventure. It was wonderful. As an adult, you see this with totally different eyes. It's although with the kind of systems that like have been moving in over the past few couple of years, like we've never had, apart from David, like for Dominica, for example, David in the end of 1979, I think, we didn't have like a hurricane that degree of like disaster and sweep through Dominica. And like in 2017, you had all those hurricanes. You had Irma and Marian and Dorian, and I don't know, there's Michael, and it was just catastrophic. So now when the hurricane season rolls around, everybody's just like, what's gonna happen?
Yeah. Everyone's triggered.
Is it gonna happen
Yeah.
again? And
Yeah.
I think, well, at the same time, it's as you were saying in the beginning, these are opportunities also to like raise awareness on questions that are so important for us, like climate change. This is not happening it's not a coincidence, people, that this is happening, and we need to do something about it, but you need to like look at it. So I was talking about the role that we play as filmmakers, and I think we don't necessarily move from that place. Like, you're not necessarily creating from this place. Like, yes, I'm going to have an impact. Yes, I'm going to change policy. You might just start by telling a story. When we did the film The Sea Between Us in 2017, we just had to tell the story. So we told the story. After Maria swept through Dominica. It wasn't with the intention of, anything, but it did open a discussion after that. And we did, meet with students in different schools in Martinique. And it was really interesting having a discussion with them where, they would talk about, what am I going to do? What would I do if this happened in my island? And a lot of the students were like, well, I'll go to France. And we're like, well, you're in the Caribbean. You're like literally right in the middle of the Caribbean. And it's really opens a space for conversation to like bring students to an awareness of where they live geographically, who they are also as individuals, their identity as people in the Caribbean, their vulnerability as Caribbean nationals, and also their solidarity, how they connect and relate to other people in the Caribbean, the resources that are around them, who they can lean on when something happens, and how they also can, help when something happens. So I think it's like such a big open space when you simply make a film without necessarily from the onset, like with this intention of, I'm gonna make all of this happen, and that comes from this place of things like this happening, like very disastrous events, but that sort of open our eyes to the bigger picture and the bigger questions, and what are we doing about it. So, yeah. And I think for you that those questions are so poignant because of, as you were saying, like the issues of the islands actually disappearing.
So I'd been standing on this soapbox like since 2014, right? And I was like, but because of having access to this interdisciplinary network, right? Like, y'all ain't read this study. You like, this thing is saying that the Bahamas is not even going to be here in a century, right? And like, for my family and friends, they were like, why are you talking to us about this? Like, this place is going to never go away. But carrying around this thing that, no, this place is going away. And having an uptick in intensity in storm conditions, I don't think, and I think even as it is happening, we are not fully grasping exactly what this means, right? Like, for us, it wasn't until, so in 2017, Dominica, Puerto Rico, and so, the Caribbean at large was affected by Irma Maria.
Yes.
But for Bahamians, it completely displaced the residents of the Ragged Island chain. And as is most of the case with the Bahamas, us as Nasubians in the capital don't really feel that. We don't really identify with that because a lot of us have never been to Ragged Island, even though it's a part of the Bahamas. A lot of us, who's not descended from people from Ragged Island, don't really have a connection to Ragged Island. But that was huge. It was huge, and it was huge for me to be able to say, hey, remember I was telling you this place going away, this is what it looks like. This is what it means to have an internal displacement of residents, right? This is what it means for you to, in the space of one night, lose your family archives, your photos, your films, your house, your car, everything that you need to function on a daily basis is gone. This is what happens. This is what it means for that to happen in one storm. And still trying to articulate to folks that this isn't gonna change.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't turn the intensity the other way. There's no knob for this thing, right? Like it's just gonna get worse and worse and worse. But I don't think that people understand what that means, and that you're not only personally displaced, this means your culture starts to disappear. Because as people become more and more concerned with survival and, okay, so now I gotta pick up and I gotta go and I gotta find a new place to live, I gotta find a new job, I gotta, figure out how I'm gonna get back and forth to work, things like our stories become less important, right? Like we start telling other stories. We don't hold on to the stuff that is, that has a large historically cultural significance, right? Like we are rewriting something else.
Yes.
We are then writing another story based on that reality, and then we've forgotten the Anansi stories start to disappear. The stories about the Lusca starts to disappear. The things that we've held close in terms of folktales start to disappear. We start to cook other meals out of necessity, right? So where I could afford to make a nice heavy pot of peas and rice or a nice pot of crab something, that may not even be the thing that I could do in the future, because now I've been displaced from this region and where I have to go to and even have crab coming across the street. You know what I mean? Like and so this is where the importance of the humanities comes in, and people aren't seeing that yet. We need the scientists to turn the needle on this thing. We need everybody. We need everybody, because we're going to need to hold on to those things when we can't be here no more, when this place isn't here anymore. So, I'm going to give this back to you, because I could go on about this all day.
Oh, no, I think that, I totally agree with you on that, like 100%, 100%. I've seen people displaced, after a storm, and I've seen the impact that it has on them. I've seen the trauma that it creates, even when they try to move forward. I've seen how it shakes like their foundation when they no longer have the landmarks and their routines and the things that they used to, like around them, how it affects their psyche and how it changes the way that they relate to the world, even the things that they remember. It's really crazy and it's unsettling. So what you're saying is so relevant, and I do hope that it's heard, because the fabric of who we are is woven so tightly in the stories that we tell, the places that we come from, the landscapes that we've grown up in. They're all part of who we are. The sea and the hills and the sand dunes and the scrappy hillsides by the sea that are eaten by the sea salt, and the shells and the rocks, all those things, the little crabs, all those things are part of us, and when we move away from them, we lose or we leave something of us behind, because linked to those things are also our habits, also, as you were saying, like our cooking, the places that we would go for entertainment, or the places that we would go to connect with our family, or to have a good time, or to relax and to free our minds. Like there's so many things that are connected to these spaces that when we shed them, like we shed pieces of ourselves. So the stories that we tell, keeps, it's sort of like a blanket that, you know, that we pull them around us every time we tell those stories, regardless of the form that they take and regardless of the narrative arc, whether it's like sort of folklore, whether it's experimental, or, you know. So I meet you there on that point, like 100%, definitely. And I'm thinking also of just like wrapping up. Is there any work that let me rephrase that. Do you have like any like archives or photos or anything that you thinking of doing around that? Like I know that you've worked on more than one project with using family photos and moving images. Do you have like any more of those that you're thinking of like using in the future, but maybe you're not sure how yet, to tell some other story?
Well, there's tons of material, right? There's,
Oh,
like I
if
said,
I
my
can.
grandfather and my father have all of these images. But I will tell you, Zephyrin, the one thing that I want to do is I want to activate Bahamians in engaging their own archives to
Yeah.
tell a bigger story. Like I gave a talk on that piece because that one with my family films, it was in a solo show of mine, and it was also in an exhibit at the National Art Gallery as a response to Hurricane Dorian, and that exhibit was called Refuge. Um, but in having a public talk there, people would come in and say, I have family films like this. How do you digitize them, right?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden my antennas go up that, wait, other people still have these things.
Yeah.
So not particularly from my family archive, but absolutely for all the archives that are out there that exist that need to be digitized or that need to be shared with the world, because people have all these albums and they don't think that there's anything valuable in there. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like this is a
Well,
whole decades of holes in the historic archive, right? And
yeah.
it's this intervention that your family has made because it's through your lens. It's not somebody that's been commissioned by Britain to come in here and make these images of you. It's your story through your lens. So yes, I am currently working on a project on all the ways that I can get other people to engage what they are holding on to in that treasure trove of theirs.
I'm like imagine this project like in other islands in the Caribbean. Every time I hear like an idea like this, I'm like, oh my God, imagine if you have
Yeah, and I don't know
in
what
other
that looks like,
islands.
right? I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if it's film. I don't know if it's a
Photos.
multimedia exhibition. I'm
Yeah.
thinking multimedia exhibition because there are so many ways. We
Yeah.
have the photos. People have these films that absolutely need to be digitized. They've aged and they're gonna glitch, like you see in the film of my own families. But all of that is a part of it, right? It's aged
Definitely.
and it tells me just how long this thing's been around, what kind of conditions it's been in this salty air, in this climate. It tells me what kind of value, based on its condition, how have you valued it? How have you kept it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all a story all in itself. And people stop me all the time. I used to have in my social media bios that I was a documentarian. And people always stop me and say, when is your film going to be available? And I'm like, there is no one film.
Yeah.
Because people often think that documentary means that you're making a documentary film, right? And then I have to go through this whole spiel. I have like an elevator pitch now, where it's like, no, all of these things, the documentary, your family archive, that's documentary. Writing these essays, that's documentary.
Yeah.
Making documentary films, that's documentary. Podcasting, all these things are all the ways that documentary. Instagram, I tell people often, no, my Instagram is the documentary. There you go. Stop waiting on anyone film because
Yeah.
there we go. I have so many posts that I update all the time, and that is the documentary. Being alive in this time and writing about the experience and how we interact with it, with the environment, with the climate, with culture, all of that is the documentary. So
you're saying right there, you have the capacity and the power and the possibility of documenting your life and documenting your reality and telling your story, whatever it is and how you choose to tell it. You can shape it as you want. You can tell it live. You can, film it over 5 years if you want. It can be one day, but you have the possibility.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Tamika, oh my God, that was such a nice conversation. Thank you.
Thank you
So much.
Definitely have me thinking differently about a lot of things that need to be actioned. I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I'm thinking of different things too, like your project on bringing to life the archives of like family archives. That's like such a wonderful project. Keep me updated on how it goes and what you decide to do with it.
Okay.
Once it comes to fruition.
Okay.
I'm so happy that you came to talk with me today. So happy to have like connected with you. I feel connected now to the
Same here. Same here.
And yeah, so we're gonna keep in touch and all the best for like the projects right now and everything that's happening in the Bahamas right now. Stay safe, your friends, your family.
Same to you.
Okay then. Take care.